Marvel Comics has their very own One Punch Man, and he is amazing. He'll fight until the cows come home, and then he'll turn around and fight the cows. I constantly make fun of 90s comics on this channel because that decade has a ton of the worst books ever made. But every so often, there was an absolute gem like Fight Man. In an era where everyone was trying their absolute hardest to one-up each other in terms of being dark, edgy, and extreme, this comic was willing to take shots at the entire industry and challenge creators to stop taking themselves so seriously, all while delivering on 48 pages of pure fun. That's right, Fight Man only got this one shot, but that's because one shot is all he needs. Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. Let's talk about it. But before getting too far into things, I want to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Storyverse. If you watch this channel often, then I know you love a good story, and Storyverse is aiming to be the next evolution in storytelling through a fascinating new system that weaves their short stories through animation. By working with writers and animators from all across the world, Storyverse has stories from a variety of genres and animation disciplines, all for the low price of free. From 3D fantasy to 2D cyberpunk, Storyverse is guaranteed to scratch whatever you've been itching to read and watch. And speaking of cyberpunk, I highly recommend checking out Transmission. It's about a cybernetic nano tattoo infestation that perfectly captures the tension, atmosphere, and themes of class division that makes the genre so effective. Or hey, maybe you'd prefer the black and white cel-shaded look of End of the West that's all about killer cows. Watch them for yourself and let me know what you think by checking out the Storyverse app available right now on the App Store and Google Play, completely free. And be sure to give them a follow at Storyverse for upcoming trailers and behind the scenes content. Once again, big thank you to Storyverse, but now let's get back to the video. Evan Dorkin is a creator that might not be on most people's comic book Mount Rushmore, but he's left quite the legacy with his influential indie books Eltingville and Milk and Cheese, along with writing for Space Ghost Coast to Coast and Yo Gabba Gabba. But early in his comic career, the Marvel Comics office would sometimes take their employees out to lunch, and during one of these outings, Dorkin turned to the iconic cover artist Kevin Maguire and joked about how he'd try to give him some work and give his career a boost with a brand new character that he could draw.
This was obviously a joke because I was doing Bill and Ted and no one had heard of me, and he was a big name with a big following. Anyway, he said, "What's his name?" And I said, "Fight Man," and he laughed and said, "What does he do?" And I blurted out, "He fights, man."
From that moment forward, Fight Man became a huge inside joke within the office, and at every opportunity, Dorkin would continuously pitch him as a bit. But to his surprise, the higher-ups eventually took him seriously and actually let him take a crack at it. See, with his Bill and Ted tie-in comic soon coming to a close, Dorkin's bosses were interested in seeing how he'd handle a more traditional superhero book, or as they called them, big fist comics, which is why Fight Man has such big fists. Of course, Evan leapt at this golden opportunity, especially because the project in and of itself was going to be the greatest joke of all. Marvel was literally going to pay him to make fun of them and their fans. The pitch became, what if a complete asshole got superpowers? And yeah, that's something that we've seen done to death these days, but in the 90s, that was still a somewhat novel concept. As Dorkin said, quote,
"Wolverine was gruff and Guy Gardner was a dick, but they still understood the assignment and they weren't imbeciles. Fight Man's just a stupid, selfish, angry, rude, defensive asshole. His motivations for being a hero aren't pure. He has a superhero code and he talks the talk, but like a lot of loudmouth, uptight superhero fans, he doesn't get the whole great power and great responsibility bit. He doesn't care about the public good, he just likes beating the crap out of people, and he realized he'd have a better time of things beating up villains. He gets pleasure in beating people up, and stopping crime gives him a license to be violent, at least using superhero comic logic."
By the time the comic starts, Fight Man is already an established hero, and everybody hates him because he's a prick to everyone. Fight Man forces the civilians he saves to take photos of him, and if it's a pretty woman, then he'll try to force a date. Hell, he only managed to get his ex-wife by literally sweeping her off her feet, flying them into space, and then refusing to bring her down until she agreed to go out with him. And to make things even worse, he recruited a teen sidekick who went up against the villain called the Hooded Eye, but during a conflict, a laser blast destroyed a dam, sweeping both Kid Fight Man and the Hooded Eye away, basically killing him. And not learning his lesson of putting children in danger, Fight Man went through 14 more child sidekicks, all of whom were also killed. Yeah, those numbers make for one hell of an approval rating, and considering that Fight Man's main revenue source is stealing and selling pieces of his defeated villains' costumes, his reputation was in the toilet, which meant that nobody was buying, and not a single brand was willing to endorse him. Luckily though, I don't have that problem. Thanks, Storyaverse. Without a stream of income, Fightman is drowning in bills, which is made even worse by his ex-wife Bev suing his pants off. And just like so many other big tough guy assholes that have come before and have come after, he talks a big talk, but as soon as they're behind closed doors, he cries and begs not to be sued. However, a massive hit gets put out on Fightman, and every villain that he has ever fought comes crawling out of the woodwork to try and collect the bounty. Now, the original idea for this comic was to use C-list villains like Stiltman and the Beetle, but Dorkin wasn't able to get Marvel's approval on this. What's made even worse is that the entire comic was so absurd that they wouldn't even allow it to be set in the main Marvel universe. On the bright side though, Dorkin had the creative ability to run wild and create a whole gaggle of new original absurd villains, including Polka Doctor, Mr. Kill, and the trio of Big Strong Man, Bigger Strong Man, and Biggest Strong Man. He also made Fisticuff Girl, which I confirmed in an interview is based on the indie hero Action Girl who debuted the following year by Evan's wife, Sarah Dreyer. I love this particular fight because since Fightman refuses to fight women, he takes a Sharpie and draws some facial hair on her so that he can just pretend that she's a dude and get on to beating her up. Dozens upon dozens of villains try to take Fightman down, but he's able to defeat each and every one of them with a single punch. But the collateral damage got to be too much, and in the heat of combat, a building falls on him, and this was enough to knock Fightman out and allowed him to be captured by the Hooded Eye, who revealed in a monologue that he is the one that put out the hit. But not just that, he is actually the long thought to be dead Kid Fightman. Obviously. Look, this plot twist was so damn obvious, but let me get this straight. You're telling me that a sidekick that was seemingly killed by his mentor's arch nemesis came back using the villain's name, which just so happens to include the word Hood. And then by assuming that mantle, the former sidekick amasses a criminal empire to get revenge on his mentor because he's disgusted that despite letting a child die on his watch, the mentor still took up more child sidekicks. This is the fucking Under the Hood storyline, but like a decade earlier. And on top of that, Kid Fightman is dating Beth, which is kind of like how after coming back to life, Jason Todd slept with Talia al Ghul. This book is so damn ahead of its time. But anyway, Fightman predictably takes him out in one shot, which is very anticlimactic, but you know, that's the point of the entire book. But when the dust settles, the police come to arrest our hero, not because of the fight and not because of the collateral damage, but because he violated child labor laws and put so many teen sidekicks in harm's way, which seemed like something they should have gotten to a lot sooner, before 15 kids were killed. But hey, what's he gonna do about the charges? Well, fight them, of course. Perfect ending. Now, obviously, I love this comic, but it did not sell well. But that doesn't mean that that was the last we ever saw of Fightman, because a decade later, Marvel was putting out a new comic called Agent X, which is basically discount Deadpool. Oh wow, a scarred up mercenary with a healing factor who makes absurd, obscene, and off-the-wall jokes. Where have I seen that before? He's so Wade Wilson that one of the main plot points of the book is that people actually think that he is Deadpool but with amnesia. But when Agent X's main writer needed to step away for a bit, new folks were brought on board to fill in. And this is where Dorkin was able to write a brand new Fightman story and actually bring him into the Marvel Universe in the process. We find out that despite fighting the charges, Fightman did end up going to jail, and after getting out, he's not allowed to fight crime, use his powers, or be near children. But even though his life is complete and utter misery, Bev still holds a grudge and hires Agent X to kill him. But to his surprise, Fightman is like totally down for it. This dude is seriously depressed, but he's forced to keep on living since he's practically indestructible. And what follows is a Looney Tunes montage of Agent X trying every assassination method under the sun, all to no avail. Funnily enough though, Fightman nearly chokes to death on a pork rind, but because he had warmed up to the guy during the whole murder montage, Agent X decides to, save him and try to be friends. With Agent X unable and unwilling to finish the job, Bev hires his old villains to take him out, leading to even more gratuitous damage and violence. But of course, they don't have any luck either, since we all know one punch will send them flying. So naturally, the Hooded Eye recruits a Nazi orangutan to give Bev superpowers so that she can just go and kill her ex-husband herself, because comics. No longer needing the Hooded Eye, Bev takes her powers out for a spin by just killing him and then shooting Fightman in the dick. And she's defeated by a villain that had been punched into the sky earlier in the issue, finally coming down and just conveniently landing on her. With his evil ex defeated, Fightman then turns on Agent X and his girlfriend, who's been here the whole time, thinking that by bringing them in, it would make him look good to the parole board, even though, you know, one of the main conditions of his parole is like to not use his powers or fight crime. But regardless, this comic is trying so damn hard to be a Deadpool book, which means that Agent X and his gal pal rip off Fightman's pants and then shoot a chicken out of a bazooka to make a building fall on him. But I mean, he survived a collapsed building in the original one-shot, so there's always a chance for Fightman to return, right? I mean, yes, but he never did. All we've seen in the decades since is a booth way in the background of my all-time favorite comic convention, alley behind a closed-down laundromat Comic-Con,
where I've been a guest for the past 8 years.
What really sucks, though, is that when I interviewed Evan Dorkin, it was super clear that he still has a ton of love for this character. And maybe I'm reading too much into things, but it seems like he laments this book's failure, resulting in him not being able to land a career in superhero comics. And you know what? I think if given a right chance, he could have become one of the greats. See, when researching this video, I hunted down a bunch of Dorkin's old interviews, and in the process, I stumbled across a public access show from 1993, the same year as Fightman's debut. And man, this dude was absolutely spitting. He was calling out all of the problems with the comic industry and accurately predicted its impending implosion.
When there's a comic that's supposed to be really worth something that's been printed in the last 2 years, generally there's thousands of extra copies floating around, held in basements, held in shops. People are all buying 3 or 5 of them, so how are they supposed to be worth anything? I think if you buy anything off that thing, you're a sucker. You deserve to be ripped off. If you're buying it to sell it back to somebody in 5 years, they've got it already. Why would you buy a comic? Why would you buy anything that you don't want? Because the main problem with comics is that as a medium, it's judged as the medium. You might not like Westerns, but you'll still go to the movies. You might not like romances, but you'll still read books. Not many left, but you'll read a book. But when you say, I've got a comic, people go, I don't like comics. I don't read comics. They still make comics. Comics are for kids. And then when you open up a comic, you go, well, yeah, they really are made for kids. And DC and Marvel wants to talk about how comics are for adults, and you open it up, and the ads are all for video games, zit cream, sea monkeys. You know, come on. The general public is still not buying comics. They're only checking out, like, the Superman dying comic. They get it. They put it somewhere. I really don't feel they came back to read the next few. People in comics have to start pushing their comics onto people and not be embarrassed, but I'll tell you the truth. There's a lot of comics I wouldn't show to my family and friends because I'm embarrassed by them. I'm embarrassed by pictures of Catwoman with her shirt ripped off and her breasts hanging out because there's no reason to keep publicizing the fact that this industry is mostly male and dateless.
I have become a big fan of Evan Dorkin over the course of making this video, and I really think that more comic fans should really be looking into his work more. So by all means, if you're interested, then take a look at Milk and Cheese, Eltingville, and Beasts of Burden. But as for the future of Fightman, I think he's a character of wasted potential, but for as much as I loved that original one-shot, I sadly don't think there's much of a place for him in the modern era of comics. I mean, after all, what if a total asshole got superpowers is kind of a done-to-death trope at this point. But like, hey, I'm not a writer. Maybe there's a great story that'd be perfect for a ridiculous character like Fightman that I just can't think of. Maybe actually make him a real Deadpool recurring character. I don't know, there could be potential. But at the very least, I hope you enjoyed this look at one of the most obscure characters in Marvel history. And if you want more nerdy knowledge, then well, this is the perfect channel for you, so why not subscribe? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. There's an airplane going by. I don't want to redo this again. Like and subscribe. Bye.